all a very warm welcome to the World Economic Forum DW debate. I'm Amrita Chima. I'm in Tokyo at the World Forum for Sport and Culture. This, as Tokyo is preparing to host a series of major sporting events in the coming years, including the Olympics in 2020. Now, every 4 years, as we saw in Rio de Janeiro, we celebrate sport, we celebrate physical endeavor. But what happens in between? The sad reality is that physical activity by individual people in cities is diminishing at a scale which is affecting our health and our well-being. So how do we change our behavior to live a life which is more healthy, more active, more happy? Active by design, the cities of the future. That's what I'll be discussing with our young, dynamic, and extremely talented panel. Let me begin by introducing you to Lisa McCallum. Welcome, Lisa. Lisa is a former vice president at Nike in the United States. She's now an independent advisor and has founded inspiring companies. Lisa's passion is to get people to move. Now, she's currently based in Australia, but spent her initial working years here in Tokyo, and I believe speaks fluent Japanese. Now, from Tokyo, we have our next panelist. We have Kohei Nishiyama. He's the co-founder and chairman of Elephant Design. He's believed to have invented the DTO system, design to order system. He has founded Kusu, that is .com, which is a Japanese company. Now, Kohei is regarded as one of the leading entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs of Japan, who's much sought after for his innovation and technological skills, also by some of the more established companies. Now, you spent your initial years, it seems, Kohei, in South America. Let me now welcome from South Africa, Mokena Makeka. He is an architect by his education, but he likes to see himself as an urban thinker, as a philosopher, and by your own definition, as chief imaginer. Now, on Twitter, you describe yourself as, "I do design, therefore I am." Now, you lived in New York in the initial years and then moved to Cape Town in South Africa, where you set up the Makeka Design Lab. So how do you envision a city of the future? I'll be asking you that. And finally, we have David Hertz. Welcome, David. David is from Brazil, but he traveled around extensively before he found himself and found that his passion lay in food. Not food just to eat as nourishment, but food as a tool to empower people to bring about social change. In 2007, you set up the Gastromotiva, an organization which you want to use to build bridges between people and to bring about social inclusion in the cities of the world. A warm welcome to all of you. Now, all of them have won huge number of awards, so many awards that I can't mention them here, but I would like you to join me in giving them a very warm welcome this morning. Now, Lisa, I'm going to begin with you. As I said, you have a passion to get people to move. While you were at Nike, you designed an initiative. Why was it so important for you?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd start with this notion that the magnitude of the physical inactivity crisis is far more significant than most of us understand or are aware of. So Americans today, compared to 1967, are over 30% less active, and it's projected that by 2030, Americans will be 50% less active. And that's a big shift in just a couple of generations. The Chinese, in half of a generation, are already 45% less active. We've just come off the back of the Rio Olympics, and we have this impression and understanding of that culture of being embedded and thriving through sports. The reality is that population is headed by 2030 to be over 35% less active. Now, these are numbers that are far too significant in behavioural shift not to expect very serious costs and consequences to emerge. So it's a very significant issue. It's not something that can be trivialised or left up to free will.
Right, it's not something which you would say is nice to have. It's an absolute must from what you are saying. We'll go into the details a little later. Now, Mokena, turning now to you. So physical activity is important, as we heard from Lisa, but what role does architecture and design play in a city? How does it encourage people to be more physically active, more socially engaged?
Well, the powerful thing about cities is that they have a spatial dimension. And in terms of that spatial dimension, that means sidewalks, the way that we make our public spaces, our parks, and so on. So your physical health is very much in relationship to how that city responds. It gives you opportunities to participate. For example, jogging, the ease with which you can walk to work, and the role between your physicality and public transport. So cities which have poor public transport, for example, or which are heavily reliant on cars or other forms of movement, actually keep people in a captive state outside of their ability to move physically. The other dimension, which I think is also important, is the psychological health of a city is very much related to the politics of how the city is designed. What do those spaces mean, its streets and so on. So well-being and health is not just a physical dimension, but it's also about the individual sense of belonging to a city, their sense of comfort, their sense of safety, and a sense of mental well-being can have an intimate relationship to how the city is designed, its architecture, its buildings, its streets, its streetscapes. Yeah.
Right, so you've raised a lot of very important issues which we'll go into in a little bit later. Let me now bring in David. David, you have a very interesting concept. You want to see food as the driving force of transforming cities. First, tell me, how did you get involved in this project and what are you trying to achieve?
Well, when you learn how to be a cook and you practice that, you understand that food has a central role in our lives. No matter what gender, where you come from, you just eat every day and you need to nourish yourself. At the table, you discuss with people, you dialogue, but we lost much of that. But I think when you think on learning how to cook or when you eat, we don't understand how much you can tackle really like big challenges of the modern world, like malnutrition, the health systems, climate change. So you learn about all of that because gastronomy dialogues with all disciplines. So we started to do vocational training. We started to go to places that we never dared to go because those are the places like the underprivileged places, the favelas in Brazil, where it's most needed a good diet, people to connect. So we started to do something like this and we've been learning so much, especially through our program, how it's important to go and understand what food waste means about citizenship. But in the end, I think cooking is an act of love, It's an act of connection.
Yeah, you had a transformative experience when you went to a favela in Brazil. Tell me about that. What happened there?
I lived in India in '94 for 1 year. When you go to a favela, it's just like as infrastructure, like India. It's a mess. But we never go. I had all I'm privileged in Brazil. I had education, but we always think over there, it's where the gangs are, so you have a lot of prejudice, you have fear. But once I went for the first time in a favela, it was like a film of my life that I was designed, there was a calling for me to go there and share everything I know. And it became my mission, and now it's not only my mission, we are making this social gastronomic movement because, as a power, as a responsibility of chefs, it's like to serve people, to engage people. So I think it's on our way back.
That's right. And turning to you, Kohei, now you are into innovation and technology in a big way. How can, in your view, that be harnessed in the city of the future?
Well, technology can provide services that functions in case of emergency or when you need a health service. And usually those services are not seen, but without technology implemented, those services won't be provided either. So without technology, city cannot function as a platform to provide the service needed for the people who are living there. Not only that, people who are just visiting for a few days.
How do you in South Africa see how you deal with a mature city where there are structures in place which are impeding this connectedness between people and the space that they live in?
Well, it's quite a serious challenge because many South African cities were really designed with the notion of separation in mind. So they were not really constructed about the well-being of people, but it was about how do you control the human body in space. And by controlling the human body in space, you can either limit or measure their political opportunity and economic opportunities. So the moment one has that in mind, that is the best way to unlock the opportunities of the city. So How do you structure public transport, for example, in such a way that you begin to service communities that don't have access to it? How do you begin to create public spaces in places like favelas or townships which have been denied the opportunity for a public space? And let's remember that public space serves both a celebratory function as well as a political function. It's where you go to protest, to celebrate, to be together. And it is critical for the functioning of any urban environment to have a public space that is both vibrant, accessible, but also malleable to how a citizen chooses to operate in there. The equivalent would be a house that doesn't have a living room. The living room is the public space of a house. That is where you gather, that is where you eat, that's where you meet, and then you retire to your bedroom. So if you think of the city as a house writ large, it's critical to have multiple public rooms where these expressions can take place.
And Lisa, how do you unlock the possibilities and the opportunities of people to be physically active in a city in a more kind of concrete sense?
Yeah, I guess if you buy into the notion that systematically most cities around the world have engineered movement out of our everyday in the way that we've designed our cities, and the way that we learn and the norms around that, and the way that we live our lives. If you buy into that, then very simply, a sort of a simple way to think about this is to have and apply a physical activity filter to the way a city comes together at a very fundamental level. And I think that mayors play a particularly critical role here. And we've seen this all around the world. So, and I'd say secondly, this is not necessarily about having a very significant new budget that becomes just unsustainable for most cities to bear. So if we're buying into the notion that we have limited resources, there's some solutions that all cities can invest in, and they're very, very simple. So, and I'll just chunk this down. So we look at Phoenix, Arizona. One of the things that they did was just they turned the lights on and opened the gates to the basketball courts to kids at nighttime, left them on until 2 a.m. It cost 60 cents a participant, and it reduced crime rates in that vicinity by 55%. So they start to solve city problems literally by giving kids another option, but at the same time, obviously, creating a physically active option. Other cities around the world that are doing a great job, Bogota, Colombia, have a program called Ciclovías. They literally shut down some of the streets to cars, open them up to people. You've got kids and families skateboarding, biking, handball, running, all sorts of physically active options suddenly become available. And again, they've seen in those circumstances a drop in crime rates of 74% of the surrounding communities. So you start to, again, solve all of these other social issues. So these are things that do not cost a fortune, and that's key to this. One other, I guess, just final example in Bristol in the UK, something as simple as looking at policy, reducing the average speed limit from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles per hour has proven to increase safe pedestrian and running activity in their neighbourhood streets. And as they poll citizens about whether there's any concern around that, by and large, there's been a very positive, supportive approach to those policies.
And so, of course, the emphasis being on actually drawing in people, young children, into physical activity so that they make it a lifestyle choice, and also integrating physical activity into our daily lives.
Yeah, I think you've raised a very, very important point. So we've talked a lot so far about how we can change the environment to make physical activity a viable option, a convenient option, something that's there all the time instead of something that we actually have to work really hard to actually find. There is something that the world also needs to focus on, and that is ensuring that kids have positive experiences in sports and physical activity very early in life.
Let me now return to you, David, with your initiative about Gastromotiva. Now, you've had great success with it in Brazil. Now it's become, but you've also been cooperating with other people on a project. How is it working? How is it transforming the lives of people through social inclusion programs?
So, only in the city in São Paulo, we have 44,000 restaurants, and they need workforce. So we are training kitchen assistants. So the chefs are getting engaged because they need a workforce, but once they get engaged, they also want to know where they come from, want to get as a movement, together. We started to replicate in cities in Brazil, in Mexico now, in South Africa, because the solution everywhere, you need people in the kitchen. But what is happening, I think, in these last 3 years, lots of chefs are getting more engaged with their community. They understood they have to source the ingredient, but now what about people? So last year I was invited to go to Italy to cook with Chef Massimo Bottura. And he designed a project to become the legacy of the Expo, the Universal Expo, where he cooked only with surplus ingredients from the Expo for homeless people using a state-of-the-art place.
So leftover food.
Leftover food that would go to waste if they are not used in that day. Not cooked, not raw food. And this is, it's so transformative because he became #1 in the world, and it's all about bringing more awareness as well to everyone how this can be, you know, based solution local, but we adapted this in Rio. So it became fascinating. It's like our new baby, new project, because we can put everything that we teach in a hub, in a place for innovation.
Innovation, talking about innovation, one thinks of you straight away, Kohei, when we talk about innovation. Now, a lot of, like, you have founded Kusu, which in Japanese, I believe, means wishes. So you take wishes from people, and if there's sufficient traction, then you actually have it produced. Can one do that with a city of the future? Can you ask people, what kind of city do you want in the future, and collect ideas and co-create with people?
Well, I think we have just witnessed that David has done that already.
Yeah.
And when you define wish, it may not have to be a wish of a kid to Santa Claus, right? So I want to eat, but I don't have money. That's my wish. I have left food here. I don't want to waste this. That's the chef's wish. If those wishes are aggregated together in the server that city provides, maybe there is a underutilized server in a city. If the mayor decides that you can use it until 2 a.m. And then everything is connected. So it's not about the future. It is always it has happened. It is happening by the leadership like David, and I guess the focus is not to design such activities, but the focus is how to enhance those activities so that it will happen in many, many different places, in different areas. So if the crime rates are high in the night and they play basketball during the daytime, well, that's the wish. And how do you collect those unspoken wishes, provides a service that will solve the problems? So it's not the health of the person who's doing the exercise. It's also the person who may be affected by providing these services.
It's not like we are chefs, we are creating something new for the population. We collaborate, we co-create. And I think the solution, they know what they need. They want better food, the information is out there to everyone now. But I think we are more like enablers of making initiatives. Yeah, we are enablers. I feel like I'm a person that I'm a channel, maybe to the community, maybe to the, I don't know, to the new food industry, but I don't think we create much, but we co-create.
Well, I would beg to differ. I think you're creating wonderful ideas, all of you. But I would like to ask, when talking about creation, you want to say something, Mokena? Because for me, the thing is, the solutions may be there, the ideas may be there, but how do you ignite the imagination of people? You wanted to say something.
Well, I think it's important to not forget the role of leadership.
Yeah, exactly.
And my colleague spoke about mayors, but which is a particular form of leadership. But there's also the mega event. Whether that is the World Cup or it's the Olympics, and it requires people in charge of those type of investments and the day-to-day investments of a city to begin to say, now, how do we begin to tap into those unspoken wishes? So we have, for example, in South Africa, when we had our World Cup, we easily could have structured our infrastructure purely to service FIFA. But we said, let us actually make our cities first and tell FIFA this is what we need. So the way you locate your stadiums, your running routes, your transport infrastructure, that was a political decision about saying the event happens, but the legacy is of the people. And I think it's very important to recognize that as much as the individual interfaces with cities in different ways, whether it's via technology or they're going to eat or they're putting on their shoes to run, leadership is a critical turning point or pivoting point to unlock people's imagination. So you require the mayor to talk to the transport engineer and say, yes, you want to put up a highway, but let's set aside 5% of the budget for a decent sidewalk. Even though that sidewalk doesn't speak specifically to your stated need of the motor vehicle. You could do the same with a sports administrator who wants to switch off the lights in the building, but you realize that there's a safety opportunity that's unlocked by dealing with that infrastructure in a different way. So that imagination is both architectural, but I do think leaders play an incredible role to say, how do we maximize the infrastructure that's around us? How can a street be more than just movement for cars and be a place of trade? How can a public square become a place of meeting, a place of joy, a place of celebration? Because let's face it, resources are scarce. With demographic change, the amount of capital that is able to be spent per individual is being reduced. So all cities have to be very smart with their resources. We all have to be very clever with what we have.
I had the good fortune to live in two cities where the mayors were very dynamic. One is Berlin, where I live now. We had a mayor who described the city as poor but sexy. He captured the imagination of the entire city. And then in Sydney, Clover Moore, she involved local people to ask them, a bit like Kusu, what wishes do you have for the city? And she brought people together. But in your view, Kohi, do you think there's enough leadership being provided that at city level, say in a city like Tokyo, where people are getting involved, you're getting the leadership, that planners, designers, innovators, people with technology are coming together?
I think it depends city by city, but let's make assumption that there aren't enough resources, because I think that will save the other cases. I think in those cases, there's a need, a wish of the city that we don't have a leadership. So there's an unspoken message from the city, we need leadership. What do? Well, I guess you aggregate and collect resources that will fill the gap the city needs. And the assumption is that those leadership needs to be provided by the mayor. But if the mayor cannot provide this leadership, well, the bottom could upload or provide, and the service could aggregate all these distributed resources so that the wishes of the city as a whole could come into reality. And social media will play a pivotal role in this.
I want to ask you, because you deal so much with innovation and technology, do you think the cities of today are attractive for young people? I mean, I would imagine that a young person needs a computer and they could be anywhere. Why would they want to stay in a city? Does a city engage young people today?
Oh yeah, Pokemon Go.
Yes, that's a great way to get people to move as well.
Yeah. People are everywhere, 2 a.m. in night. I mean, they're walking around with blue faces. It was illuminated by the iPhone, right?
Yeah. How do you see it, Lisa? How do you see a city of the future?
Well, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is the role of schools in cities. One of the challenges that we've had with the education system over decades now is that there's been this, I guess, norm created that A, we sit to learn, and B, that it's more important to spend more time on math and science than it is on physical education. And as budgets get squeezed, we have seen in many major economies around the world, budgets get cut for PE. We've seen recess time where kids have ordinarily played out on the playground cut, and we've seen all sorts of pressures on schools to take all of their resources and literally put them into a finite set of subjects. And the research is clear on this also. It doesn't work to do that. Active kids do a lot better. And as society and schools and head teachers and policy makers start to better understand that this is not just about the waistline of kids when we talk about the need for physical activity. This is about them scoring 40% higher in their grades. This is about them having 30 to 40% less chance of having anxiety, stress and depression. This is about them being 30% less likely to be obese. The benefits of building and focusing efforts, particularly within the school setting, on kids being active is absolutely critical. Schools need to, and administrators and teachers and parents, if you can just start to think about building in opportunities before, during and after school for kids to be active, you start to solve the issue in a really practical way. How are kids getting to school? An example in Calgary was the mayor there solved congestion issues for the school from a traffic perspective by building opportunities in working with the transportation department, the parents and teacher association, the school, for kids to start participating in walking buses. So literally the drop-off points to the school, 500 metres and a kilometre out, kids are now arriving at school after having physical activity, and we know the research shows that they learn so much better after
In
having a
fact,
level of
in
activity.
Canada, they're also designing cities, and there's an initiative, there's a non-governmental organization which called 8 to 80. They're designing a city which is for people from 8 to the years of 80.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good idea, Mokena? Should one have a master plan to design cities?
Well, I'm not so sure it's a master plan, but you know, when we talk about young people and young cities, we also need to think of young families. Many of the cities that are very attractive, you find that a young couple who might have an infant or a child, suddenly that city becomes antagonistic to them. Where do you take the infant to play? Where do they relax? Where do they interact? And I think that when you begin to take care of children and the elderly, in some ways that allows you to cover the whole spectrum of society much more effectively. So where can a grandfather or a grandmother go for a safe walk? And that has an implication on residency. That has an implication on how you think on housing, but most importantly, social infrastructure such as schools. So I've been making the argument that when we look at the youth bulge now, which is happening in many countries of the South, the question, what's going to happen in the year 2030, 2040, when this youth bulge suddenly comes of age and wants to start having families? The cities that we're creating right now are not going to be able to respond to that need. So the cities of the future need to start saying, imagine a city of young families, imagine a city of the elderly. The middle bracket, in terms of the bell curve, will be able to accommodate themselves, but it is so important to create the right types of infrastructure for these opportunities. And the norms and standards around the infrastructure has to change. So for example, in many parts of Southern Africa, they would say a typical school has to have a field and this and this and so on. And that becomes a capital threat to budget people, whereas you can reimagine how a field works. You can reimagine how a school can operate in an urban setting. You can reimagine all of these opportunities. And I think there's a dimension of imagination required, because the old model of a city that grows forever is simply impossible. Compact cities are critical, and that compaction means how do we make opportunities from 8 to 80? In fact, I'd even argue from 18 months to 90, but that's a different thing.
So physical well-being is important, but equally mental well-being is really important. Mental health is very important.
100%.
Emotional well-being is very important, and which is where your project comes in, David. You're working very closely. You see food as a way of generating love. Do you think in a city of a future, there is a place for your kind of activity, that people will care about helping each other, people training young people in favelas and things, and to go and cook together?
You know what I love about this new project, which is Vitoria Gastromotiva? If you take the city of Rio, and if you start to understand the food chain, going from the macro level to get to the micro level, it's between people. This is one of our suppliers. 120 trucks leave his storage, and they come back every day with 20 trucks, and they incinerate all that food. So when I start to dialogue with him, we start to say, let's find a solution for this. Because these drive us to do something, to collaborate, to learn together. When we start bringing this food, the surplus food, inside the place, we have to interact in the kitchen. Again, we have to learn, we have to be creative. It creates bonds to us. Then when we have to serve a meal for a homeless people, that touches our heart. It touches everyone's heart. It connects us all in the city. When you have volunteers from the neighborhood going there, it changes the culture. I think it's all about a cultural behavior.
This brings us to the same point of connectivity, which you said is so important. Now, where does technology again play a role in it? Because when you look at young people today, they're so kind of busy with kind of screen time. Pokemon Go is a very positive example because it actually makes them walk a bit. Where do you see the urban transformation taking place? Urban renewal, urban transformation taking place?
That's
Big
a difficult question to
Yes, but it's a
answer.
big question as well.
But let me answer back that technology alone cannot provide a solution. And also, maybe I'm making the question even more complicated, but it's not necessarily two wishes. Maybe there are the third and fourth actors in the system. So I think David has mentioned a very important point, the presence of volunteer, the regional people. Without those people's understanding, what he has done would not have happened. So it's not the chef, it's not the people in favela, but it's a volunteer who would help and promote this idea. And technology, when this action happens, technology can scale it. Technology can sophisticate it. Technology can make it frictionless. But I think the first, let me name it a prototype of the model or the archetype, it needs to be designed by the regional people without much money. I mean, so it has to be voluntarily. The budget must be limited. Otherwise, it won't scale to different places. So technology does contribute to the solution, but it won't be the beginning point. So maybe I have answered half. But
yeah, but then tell me the other half. If technology is not the whole
Combine
solution, yes, absolutely, and you're the technology expert here. Now, if technology it doesn't provide the whole solution, what else is needed, from your point of view?
No, it's the action. It's the voluntarily act. If you see
So
a
it's
problem,
human
if you see,
initiative.
right?
Yeah.
You feel there is an unspoken wish, and you feel you need to do something. So you move your body, you do something. As a result, you learn, and the repercussion of all these activities visualizes that logistics is a business. See, temperature is business. I mean, how to put this food in the refrigerator for 2 days will solve, distances traveled, for instance. So
infrastructure is very important, but equally important is what one could describe as green infrastructure.
Yes.
And this is where you would be perfect to answer that question. How do you
You're quite
involve?
amazing because you've actually tapped into a thought that came into my mind. As my colleagues were speaking, I have a wish, and I think to articulate that wish is, I imagine a city which is edible. Now, when I say edible,
That ties in with it as
yes,
well.
yes, but it's not just about the place where you eat food in the store, but if we started to plant trees in our cities, which were edible, which as a child walking home to school, you can pick fruit, you can pick whatever it is on the way home, then not only are you creating a green city, but you're creating a city which is also productive in its own right. You're also creating safer spaces which are from the sun and protection. So the notion of edible streets could be an amazing running opportunity for children and so on. But the problem is that we design these concrete jungles and then the trees are added as an afterthought. If we began to green our cities with productive spaces for the making of food so that our food doesn't have to come from farms on the far edge, trucked in, with obvious sort of environmental sort of impacts, but also that people are aware of where food comes from. And that relationship between green, an edible city, and the type of spaces, that's innovation. So, your question before was, will technology solve it? I think it's more about innovation. And there's innovation in landscape architecture, there's innovation in food production, there's innovation in technology. We need innovation more than technology per se. And the basic things are opportunities for making a new type of city.
You have to change the mindset. I think that's what you're all saying. Now, we're running out of time. So I just want to give, if I may, a final comment from you, Lisa. I mean, I think what all of you are saying from different perspectives is we need to actually rethink the way cities function. Do you want to say a final comment on that before I ask the floor for their questions?
Yeah, I think we've talked about so many things, and I hope there's been some level of inspiration that's come from the very practical examples that have been put on the table today. Fundamentally, we globally are in a situation where if we stop moving as a population and kids stop participating in sports because the experience is not positive enough, what then becomes the relevance of sport to society? How long can we sustain and enjoy the benefits of actually having sport as part of our culture and as part of the extraordinary far-reaching benefits that it has? So I think that as my closing concern, that this is not something to take for granted anymore. This is something, particularly for Tokyo, as we head towards the Tokyo 2020, there is an extraordinary opportunity to create a far-reaching legacy to ensure that not only do you build the city of the future through figuring out how to apply a physical activity lens to ensure the population is active but also healthy with nutritional elements embedded, but also how do we ensure that no child is ever left on the sidelines?
You tentatively raised your hand, Mokena. Do you want to say a quick word before I ask the audience?
Well, I think, yes, just quickly to say that we have to recognize that not all governments or governance is as robust in different parts of the world. So in certain places, it might be that you have a responsive electorate and so on, and a system that allows you to engage with the mayor. But for many cities, in many parts of Africa, the mayor is dysfunctional, absent, and if you ask the average person who the mayor was, they say, do we have a mayor? And I'm being quite frank. So what that means is that certain levels of innovation have to evolve and be more disruptive with different operators. So you find in other cities it's much more about individual agency. It's more about community action that actually provides the inspiration to government. You asked the question, where does the imagination come from? Not all cities are equally equipped with the tools to be able to serve their citizens. And in many African cities, there's this huge divide between where the capital is available, which therefore services part of society, and the forgotten other, if you will, that has to somehow navigate. And this could be favelas, townships, etc. And the question is, how do you bring these opportunities to those communities who probably even need them more? So I just wanted to make the point that we shouldn't gloss over the inequality that defines many of our global cities right now. That inequality has an infrastructural dimension, a governance dimension, and even a policy dimension. So we have to both imagine but not rely on others to imagine. It's all about how do you...
You have to be a chief imaginer yourself.
Yes, well, you have to participate,
Yes.
yeah.
Great, thank you very much for all your comments. For now, I want to ask the audience if people would like to ask a question directed to one panelist or the other.
My name is Willem van Mechelen, Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Maybe not so much a question, but more an issue to debate. Hearing Mr. Makeke say Pepsi, Coke stimulating physical activity at the same time. Now, given the low-carb, high-fat debate you also have in your country, do you have any strong opinions about this kind of public-private partnership?
South Africa has significant problems of obesity, as you know, and our Gini coefficient is one of the worst in the world. So, and our cities are one of the most unequal, particularly if you look at the average time of walking towards infrastructure, etc. So I think I'm not sure what the debate would be. I mean, if anything, I think it's critical to have cities that are far much more engaged from a perspective of allowing citizens to really be able to have opportunities and choices and not be constrained and limited, either in terms of food opportunities, in terms of how they walk to work, or how they imagine their city.
Thank you very much. A very inspiring panel. Neil Dunn from British Telecom. My question is for Mr. Nishiyama. We're in a very technology-rich country, and my question is really around the rise of artificial intelligence, and particularly looking forward to 2020. There's a lot of concern that artificial intelligence will be a big part of the issue and maybe accelerate some of the physical inactivity issues that Lisa has laid out earlier. How can artificial intelligence actually be part of the solution? What practical things do you think Japan can lead the world on that can address artificial intelligence being something that can improve and enhance our lifestyles?
Artificial intelligence is not a future technology, it's already here. And it is already around us. It's only that it's immature and it's not functioning as we wanted it to function. But what it does is that combined with sensor, combined with network, artificial intelligence will be sourced more information, and also if we feed the artificial intelligence the result, let's say someone made a mistake and then the consequence of that mistake was X. And then someone else made a same mistake, but the consequence was not X. Artificial intelligence will be able to learn that there are different cases. And if we start early and train these intelligences, we'll be able to get more sophisticated intelligences. And it's already around us. Believe it or not, a lot of streets in Tokyo already have a CCTV camera, and it has a face recognition capability. It is able to take information, but we don't have a capability to process that information. So it's this artificial intelligence capability that needs to be built so that the consequences of our behavioral patterns will mean something meaningful for the service or civil service or the other kind of services that required by us. So that's the current status of this, and it'll be improved.
before we end, I want to give the panelists, each of them, 30 seconds to answer a question that if there was one thing you could have for a city of the future, what would that one thing be? Not more than 30 seconds, if possible, 15 seconds. Lisa, let me start with you.
A focus on two things. Some level of leadership that really focuses on applying a physical activity filter for all design aspects from an infrastructure and environment perspective, and leaders who understand how to build positive experiences into a child's first 10 years of life with sports and physical activity.
Thank you. What about you, Makena?
It's very difficult to top that. For me, a city that produces its own food within its own footprint area, I think is critical. And I think it's also super important to make sure that cities are equitable and begin to address the unspoken wishes of its citizens. To remember that not everybody is capacitated to either participate politically or have the courage or the comfort to express themselves. And how does leadership make sure that those conversations come into how the city is imagined? And of course, using better architects.
Better architects. But you're more than an architect, you're an urban thinker. Tell me about you, David.
Well,
what
I would
is your
say
wish?
it's opportunities for minorities. You need to create jobs, you need to foster, inclusion and try to find the parallel system that provides all of that to people. And I think every time you eat consciously and you think, who is behind all of that?
Excellent. What about you, Kohei? What's your final comment?
I really like the vision that Makena has presented. Street with a tree with fruit. So we have gone beyond from the concept of healthy city to the fertile city.
Yeah.
Now kids can go, take a snack, go to school eating. And I think that's a very beautiful vision. And we can go towards that direction.
Well, I have to say that all of you have shared your visions with us and you were a very inspiring panel. Each of you individually has an inspirational story to tell, and I thank you very much for that. Now, you were watching the DW World Economic Forum debate coming to you from Tokyo. I thank our live audience here from the World Forum for Sport and Culture. I thank all of you viewers, wherever you may be, wherever you've been watching us, for being with us. And most of all, I'd like to thank our splendid and inspirational panel for coming in here and sharing their thoughts with us. I'm Amrita Chima. Bye-bye.